if they have decided for independence because they hate Moscow and they feel economically exploited, they feel abused because the children die on the Ukraine battlefield, if they think that Putin is a bastard and we want to be free of Moscow colonial submission, and if they decide that, then they will do it, and they will just send you the letter asking for recognition. And then you can say, ooh, the nukes. Yes, you said it the same in 91. And by the way, there was no nuclear war in 91. And the nuclear power has dismantled itself, dissolved itself into 50 new states, 15. That was what the Soviet Union was breaking up. And the nukes were simply transferred to Russia. And a similar process is exactly now possible as well, because the more realistic picture than 41 new states is, of course, that central Russia, that with Moscow as a capital, will basically lose all its periphery. That means the Asia, Siberia, and all these Asian republics, they will basically go and declare independence. Yeah? And also everything in the south, there's a lot there as well in the Caucasus, and maybe in the north as well. And there is an ethnic base, there is a own identity, there is a own history. Of course, there is, of course, a lot of Moscow brutality, because in the history of Russia, when you go back to the Russian Civil War, you had already an independent Siberia. You had an independent, whatever, not Chechnya, but you had several of these independent states already, but neither the West was ready to recognize them. And some of the advisors of Kolchak, who was in Siberia, he had the money of the Russian Tsar, he had this Czechoslovakian legion. He could have easily said, I go for independence of Siberia. And some people produced it on him, but he was an imperial Russian general. And he said, no, no, the Tsar, no, no, Russia. And so he was defeated, because basically this central Russia, and that's the whole history of Russia, here is the most population density, and they can easily extend towards the east and the south and kill everybody who is opposing them. And that's also, in a short version, the history of Russian colonialism, because it was bloody wars where Russia has conquered all these territories, east and south. But they could also easily go, and then Russia will have a central Russian state, like, for example, with 100 million people, like Germany around in that, or Turkey, because the history of Turkey and Germany and ultimately Austria, where I come from, but it's just a very small country now. It is very much similar, but Serbia is a very good example for that one. When big empires fall, very often they go back into this kind of central state which has been dominating the rest. Yeah? You see that in Germany, you see that in Austria to some extent, because Austria is a lot of the nobility of the former empire, and the rich people, they all fled to Vienna to be safe. And then the same you see in Turkey, where basically Turkey was building a nation state of Turks out of a multi-ethnic in their central part, and they moved their capital from Istanbul to Ankara. You see it in Serbia, that today is still a very revanchist country, where basically they think it was wonderful to have Yugoslavia because they dominated it. And so now it's basically a 7 million state and not a 21 million state, but they are still full of revanchism. And you could see the same basically say for Russia today out of this Soviet Union. And Russia could shrink further towards a central Russian state with, let's say, approximately 100 million people. And there would be 20 new states forming in the south of Russia, today's Russian Federation. Tatarstan, for example, Kalmykkistan, and many others. And it's quite useful for young students of diplomacy and politically interested to learn some of the states. And because I do this with my children from time to time, and I always question them, what's the capital of Kalmykkistan, and what's the capital of Astrakhan, and what's the capital of this beautiful Buryatia? Obviously, nobody knows that so much. And you can say that this will never happen, but invite me next year and we will discuss about it, because nobody believed that Ukraine will make a war in Russia now, as they are doing. And everybody told me of these big political experts here on Twitter that the surprise on the battlefield is that Ukraine has already lost. It's impossible to defeat Russia. And now things are turning the table. The Ukrainians are turning the table. So a lot of things can happen. And the future I argue for is, of course, much better for the people of Chechnya to have an independent country.
Mm-hmm.
And that is much better than being under some kind of Islamist terrorist dictatorship of Kadyrov, who is basically one of the most crazy rulers of any
Oh,
entity in the
yes.
world.
There's no
So
doubt about that.